The wagon lurched to a stop outside the land office in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and Victoria Reynolds knew that stepping down from that seat would change everything about the life she had carefully planned back in Philadelphia. Her husband was dead. Thomas Reynolds, the man she had married by proxy 3 months ago, the man whose letters had painted pictures of rolling hills and fertile land, the man she had never actually met in person, had died 2 weeks before she arrived. A riding accident, they told her in town. His horse had spooked near a canyon edge, and that was that. Victoria sat in the land office now, her black morning dress collecting dust, while a balding clerk shuffled through papers with ink-stained fingers. Mrs. Reynolds, I am truly sorry for your loss, the clerk said, though his eyes held more curiosity than sympathy. However, there is the matter of the property. Your marriage certificate is valid, proxy or not, which means under Arkansas law, the land transfers to you as his widow. Victoria straightened her spine. Then I will take possession of it, the clerk blinked. Madam, with respect, running a homestead alone is not something a woman, particularly one from the city, can manage. Perhaps you should consider selling and returning east. I did not travel 800 miles to turn around at the first difficulty, Victoria said, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. Where is the property? About 6 miles northwest of town. 160 acres, though only about 40 are cleared. There is a cabin, a barn that needs significant repair, and some cattle that have likely wandered or been stolen by now. He paused. Your nearest neighbor is Dalton Drake. His spread borders yours to the west. He is a decent man, runs cattle mostly. You might want to speak with him about purchasing the land. He has made offers before. Victoria took the deed papers and the rough map the clerk provided. She spent the night in the small boarding house on the edge of town, lying awake on a lumpy mattress, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the frontier settlement. Dogs barking in the distance, men laughing outside a saloon, the creak of wood settling. Everything felt foreign and slightly dangerous. But going back meant admitting defeat, meant returning to her sister's house in Philadelphia, where she would be the pitied spinster aunt, useful for minding children and nothing more. At 23, she had wanted more than that half-life. She still did. The next morning, Victoria hired a man with a wagon to take her to the property. The ride took nearly 2 hours over rough roads that were barely more than packed earth trails. When they finally arrived, her heart sank. The cabin was small, perhaps 20 feet square, with a stone chimney and walls that had gaps she could see daylight through. The barn leaned heavily to one side, and the fence around what must have been a corral had collapsed in several places. Weeds grew tall everywhere, and the whole place had an air of abandonment that made her chest tight. "You sure about this, madam?" the wagon driver asked. "I could take you back to town." "No," Victoria said, climbing down. "Please help me unload my trunks." He did, though she could feel his skepticism in every movement. When he drove away, the silence was overwhelming. Victoria stood in the middle of what was now her property and fought the urge to sit down and cry. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves and went to inspect the cabin. Inside was better than outside, marginally. There was a rope bed frame without a mattress, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, a cast iron stove that looked functional, and shelves built into the walls. Everything was covered in a layer of dust. A family of mice had made a nest in one corner, and she found their droppings scattered across the floor. The single window had actual glass, though it was so dirty she could barely see through it. Victoria spent the rest of the day cleaning. She swept, scrubbed, and aired out the cabin as best she could. She stuffed her spare clothes into the gaps in the walls to block the wind. She made up the bed frame with blankets from her trunk, knowing she would need to acquire a proper mattress somehow. By the time the sun began to set, she was exhausted, filthy, and hungry. She had brought some food with her from town, bread and cheese and dried meat, and she ate it cold because she had no wood for the stove and no idea where to find any. As darkness fell, the sounds changed. Coyotes howled in the distance, making her jump. Something rustled in the brush near the cabin. Every shadow seemed threatening. Victoria lay on her makeshift bed, still fully dressed, and wondered what on earth she had been thinking. This was impossible. She was going to fail. She must have slept eventually, because she woke to bright sunlight streaming through the dirty window and the sound of hoofbeats outside. Victoria sat up quickly, her heart pounding. She smoothed her hair back as best she could and went to the door. A man sat astride a tall bay horse, looking at the cabin with an expression somewhere between concern and confusion. He was perhaps in his late 20s, with dark hair under a worn hat, a strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and eyes that were startlingly blue even at this distance. He wore dusty work clothes, a leather vest, and a gun belt that made Victoria acutely aware of how vulnerable she was. "Morning," he called when he saw her. His voice was deep with a soft Arkansas drawl. "I am Dalton Drake. I own the spread west of here. You must be Mrs. Reynolds." Victoria stepped out onto the small porch, grateful that she had at least brushed the worst of the dirt from her dress. "I am Victoria Reynolds. How did you know I was here? Word travels fast in these parts. The clerk at the land office mentioned you had come to claim Thomas's land." He removed his hat, holding it against his chest. "I am real sorry for your loss, madam. Thomas was a good neighbor. His death was a shock to everyone." "Thank you," Victoria said carefully. She studied him, trying to gauge his intentions. "I appreciate your condolences." Dalton shifted in his saddle. "Madam, I do not mean to be forward, but I wanted to extend an offer. I know this land. I know what it takes to work it. If you are interested in selling, I would give you a fair price, enough to set yourself up comfortably back east." There it was. Victoria felt her jaw tighten. "I am not interested in selling, Mr. Drake." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You are planning to work the land yourself. That is my intention. Do you have experience with farming or ranching? I will learn." Dalton was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes assessing her in a way that made her feel both seen and judged. "Madam, I do not doubt your determination, but this is hard country. Winter comes early in the hills. You need to get crops in the ground, repair that barn before it falls completely, mend all those fences, round up whatever cattle might still be around, and lay in supplies for cold months. That is a lot for an experienced homesteader, let alone someone just arrived from the city." "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Drake, but I can manage. Can you split wood? Butcher meat? Shoot a gun?" Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks, anger mixing with embarrassment because the answer to all those questions was no. "I can learn," she repeated. Dalton put his hat back on, and for a moment she thought he would simply ride away and leave her to her inevitable failure. Instead, he dismounted, tying his horse to the broken corral fence. "All right, then. First thing you need is wood for that stove, or you will be eating cold meals until winter kills you. You have an axe." "I do not know," Victoria admitted. "Probably in the barn if it has not been stolen." He walked toward the leaning structure, moving with an easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his surroundings. Victoria followed, unsure whether to be grateful or insulted by his presumption. They found an axe, its handle cracked but functional, along with a few other basic tools. Dalton hefted the axe and headed toward a stand of trees behind the cabin. You should watch how this is done. You will need to do it yourself soon enough." Victoria watched as he selected a dead tree, not too large, and began to chop. His movements were efficient, powerful, the axe biting deep into the wood with each swing. Despite herself, she noticed the way his shoulders moved, the strength in his arms, the focus in his expression. Within 20 minutes, he had the tree down and was cutting it into manageable lengths. "You stack it against the cabin wall, under the eaves so it stays dry," he explained, carrying the first armload over. "Kindling is small, split pieces. Logs for overnight are bigger. You always want your wood supply at least a few weeks ahead." Victoria helped him carry the wood, her arms aching from the unfamiliar work. When they had a decent pile stacked, Dalton showed her how to start a fire in the stove, how to adjust the damper, how to tell when it was hot enough for cooking. He made it look simple, but she could see the dozen small decisions that went into it, the knowledge that came from years of experience. "Thank you," she said when the fire was crackling steadily. "I am grateful for your help." Dalton nodded, studying her again with those penetrating blue eyes. "You really mean to stay?" It was not quite a question, but Victoria answered anyway. "I do." "Why? You did not know Thomas. You could sell this place, take the money, and start over somewhere easier." Victoria considered not answering, but something in his direct gaze made her speak honestly. "Because in Philadelphia I have nothing. I am an extra woman in my sister's household, useful for childcare and nothing more. Thomas's letters offered me something different, a partnership, a purpose, the chance to build something of my own. His death does not change what I need." Dalton was quiet for a long moment. "That is fair," he said finally. "But you need to understand what you are up against. This land is not forgiving. One mistake, one bad decision, and it can kill you. Pride is not worth your life." "I am not motivated by pride, Mr. Drake. I am motivated by necessity." Something shifted in his expression, a hint of respect perhaps. "All right then. I will stop by tomorrow, bring you some supplies. You need seed if you are going to get any kind of crop in, even a small kitchen garden. You need tools, probably food staples to get you through until you can establish yourself. Consider it a loan if you want. You can pay me back when you are on your feet." Victoria wanted to refuse, to insist she could manage on her own, but practicality won out. "That is very kind. I accept, and I will indeed repay you. Fair enough." Dalton headed for his horse, then paused. "One more thing, you have a gun." "No." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small revolver. "This is a Smith & Wesson 32. It is not much for hunting, but it will do for protection." "You ever shot a gun?" "No." "I will teach you tomorrow then. Cannot have you out here alone with no way to protect yourself." He saw her hesitation and added, "There are coyotes, occasionally a mountain lion, and sometimes men who do not respect boundaries. You need to be able to defend yourself." Victoria took the gun carefully, feeling the weight of it in her hand. It was smaller than she had expected, the metal cold against her palm. "Thank you." Dalton mounted his horse in one smooth motion. "I will see you tomorrow, Mrs. Reynolds. Try not to burn the cabin down with that stove." There might have been a hint of humor in his voice, but he rode away before she could respond. Victoria watched him go, feeling a confusing mix of gratitude, frustration, and something else she could not quite name. He had been kind, more than kind really, but she suspected he still believed she would fail and sell out within a month. She would prove him wrong. The next few days established a pattern. Dalton arrived each morning, bringing supplies and knowledge. He taught her how to shoot the revolver, setting up makeshift targets and patiently correcting her stance, her grip, the way she squeezed the trigger instead of pulling it. He showed her how to hitch up the mule he had brought, how to plow a small plot for a garden, what seeds to plant and how deep. He helped her repair the worst of the fence and shore up the barn enough that it would not collapse in the next storm. Victoria worked until her hands blistered and her back ached. She had never been so tired in her life. Every muscle hurt. Her skin, despite the bonnet she wore, began to tan and freckle in a way that would have horrified her sister. But she also felt something new, a sense of accomplishment that came from tangible work, from seeing the results of her labor in the turned earth, the stacked wood, the mended fence. Dalton was patient but demanding. He did not coddle her or make allowances for her inexperience beyond the teaching itself. If she did something wrong, he corrected her directly. If she did something well, he acknowledged it with a nod or a brief word of approval. She learned quickly that he was a man of few words, more comfortable with action than conversation, but that did not make him unkind. Just different from anyone she had known before. One afternoon, as they worked on patching the barn roof, Victoria finally asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why are you helping me so much? You made your offer to buy the land. I refused. Most men would have left me to fail so they could buy the property cheap when I gave up." Dalton hammered in another nail before answering. "I knew Thomas. He was a decent man, a hard worker. He was excited about you coming, talked about it for weeks after he got word you had agreed to marry him. He deserved better than dying before he could meet his bride. The least I can do is help his widow get established. That is honorable of you. It is just neighborly. Out here you depend on each other. No one survives alone. Even so, thank you. I could not have managed without your help." Dalton glanced at her, and for the first time she saw him really smile, not just the polite expression he had shown before, but something genuine that reached his eyes. "You are tougher than I thought you would be. Most city women would have given up by now." Most city women were not facing the alternative I was facing. "The sister's house you mentioned. Yes, my brother-in-law is not unkind, but I am a burden there. Another mouth to feed, another person taking up space." When Thomas's letters came through a matrimonial service, offering marriage and a partnership in building a homestead, it seemed like an answer to prayer. She paused. "Even though he is gone, this place still represents freedom I would not have otherwise." That is a lot of pressure to put on 160 acres of rough land. "Perhaps, but it is my rough land." Dalton chuckled, the sound surprising her. "Cannot argue with that." They worked in companionable silence for a while after that. Victoria found herself noticing small things about him. The way he moved with unconscious grace, the competence in his hands as he worked, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar where it needed cutting. He was handsome, she acknowledged to herself, but more than that, he was self-assured in a way the men she had known in Philadelphia were not. There was no artifice to him, no performance. He simply was who he was. It was dangerous to notice such things about a man who was only being neighborly. 2 weeks after Victoria had arrived, Dalton showed up with 3 cows and a young bull. "Found some of Thomas's herd mixed in with mine," he explained. "Brands confirm these are yours. There are probably more scattered around, but this is a start." Victoria stared at the cattle, having no idea what to do with them. "How do I take care of them?" "They mostly take care of themselves this time of year. Plenty of grass. You just need to keep them on your property and out of trouble. Come winter, you will need to supplement with hay if the snow gets bad." He showed her how to check them over for injury or illness, how to tell if they were healthy, the basics of animal husbandry. "This is overwhelming," Victoria admitted. "You will learn. Everyone starts somewhere." "Where did you start?" Dalton leaned against the corral fence, his expression going distant. "My father had a small ranch in Texas. I grew up working it. When he died, my older brother got the land, so I headed north looking for my own place. Found the property here about 5 years ago. It was not much then, even less than what you have got now. Built it up slowly. Do you have help? Hired men, one regular hand, couple of day workers during busy seasons. Mostly I manage on my own. It is not a huge operation, maybe 200 head of cattle. Enough to make a living if you are careful. That sounds lonely. It can be, he admitted. But it is mine. I built it. That counts for something. Victoria understood that feeling completely. It was exactly what she was seeking, that sense of ownership, of creating something from nothing. Yes, it does. Their eyes met and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits perhaps. Dalton looked away first, pushing off from the fence. I should head back. I have work waiting. Of course. Thank you for bringing the cattle, he nodded, then paused. There is a town gathering next Saturday. Dance and dinner at the church hall. You should come. Good way to meet people, establish yourself as part of the community. I am in mourning, Victoria said automatically, for a man you never met. The bluntness of it startled her, but he was not wrong. It still seems disrespectful. Your choice, but isolation will not help you survive out here. You need friends, connections, people who will help when trouble comes. That starts with showing up. He mounted his horse. Think about it. After he rode away, Victoria did think about it. Mourning customs dictated she should withdraw from society for at least a year, wear black, refrain from socializing. But those customs came from a world where she had been surrounded by people, where society's opinion mattered to her daily life. Here, things were different. Dalton was right that she needed connections. She could not afford to alienate the community by seeming standoffish. The following Saturday, Victoria put on her best black dress, the one with the minimal bustle that was already outdated by Philadelphia standards, but was the finest thing she owned. She borrowed the mule and the small wagon Dalton had left for her use and drove herself into town. The church hall was already crowded when she arrived, families and couples and clusters of young people talking and laughing. The smell of food filled the air, and a small group of musicians was setting up in one corner. Victoria felt suddenly self-conscious, an outsider among people who had known each other for years. She was considering quietly leaving when a woman about her own age approached with a friendly smile. You must be Mrs. Reynolds. I am Sarah Mitchell. My husband and I have the farm about 3 miles south of you. It is nice to meet you, Victoria said, grateful for the approach. I was so sorry to hear about Thomas, such a terrible accident, but it is good to see you have decided to stay. We need more women out here. Sarah linked arms with her in a familiar way. Come on, I will introduce you around. The next hour passed in a blur of names and faces. Victoria met farmers and ranchers, shopkeepers from town, wives and daughters and sons. Everyone was polite, though she could sense the curiosity beneath their greetings. She was an oddity, the proxy bride who had arrived to find her husband dead, now trying to work a homestead alone. She was sampling a piece of pie someone had pressed on her when Dalton arrived. He had cleaned up, shaved, put on what were clearly his good clothes. He looked different, more polished, though still undeniably himself. Several women brightened when they saw him, and Victoria felt an unexpected twist in her stomach when a pretty blonde made a point of greeting him warmly. That is Rebecca Hall, Sarah whispered to her. She has been setting her cap at Dalton for 2 years now. He is not interested, but she does not give up. It is none of my business, Victoria said, perhaps too quickly. Sarah gave her a knowing look. Dalton is a good man. One of the best around here. Any woman would be lucky to catch him. Before Victoria could respond, Dalton had spotted them and was heading their way. Mrs. Reynolds, Sarah, good to see you both. Victoria came, Sarah said unnecessarily. I told her she did the right thing. Cannot hide away on the homestead forever. Agreed. Dalton looked at Victoria. How are things going with the cattle? Well enough, I think. I check on them twice a day like you showed me. Good. He paused, then said, the dancing will start soon. Would you do me the honor? Victoria hesitated. Dancing seemed beyond the bounds of morning propriety. But then again, she had already come to a social event, and refusing would be rude. All right. Yes. When the music started, Dalton led her onto the floor with confidence. He was a good dancer, better than she had expected, leading her smoothly through the simple steps. Victoria had learned formal dancing back in Philadelphia, but this was different, more relaxed, more fun somehow. You look surprised, Dalton said, amusement in his voice. I did not expect you to dance well, my mother insisted, said a man should know how to conduct himself in polite company, even if he planned to be a rancher. He guided her through a turn. You are doing fine. I feel like everyone is watching us. They are. You are the new widow. I am the eligible bachelor who has been helping you. People like to talk. He did not seem bothered by it. Does that concern you? Should it? Victoria met his eyes. People might get the wrong idea. What idea is that? That there is something between us beyond neighborly assistance. Dalton was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes searching her face. And is there? The question caught her off guard. She felt her pulse quicken. I do not know what you mean. I think you do. His voice was low, meant only for her. I think you feel it too, this thing that has been growing between us. Victoria did not know what to say. She had been trying so hard not to acknowledge the feelings developing in her heart, the way she looked forward to his visits, the way her day felt incomplete when he did not stop by, the way she had started noticing everything about him. It was too soon. It was inappropriate. Thomas had been dead less than a month. I am in mourning, she whispered, for a stranger. That does not make it right. No, Dalton agreed, but it does not make your feelings less real either. The song ended and Victoria stepped back quickly. Thank you for the dance, Mr. Drake. She saw the flash of hurt in his eyes at the return to formality, but he just nodded. Of course, Mrs. Reynolds. Victoria spent the rest of the evening feeling unsettled. She danced with a few other men, made polite conversation, helped the women clean up afterward. But she was acutely aware of where Dalton was, who he was talking to, the way Rebecca Hall kept finding reasons to touch his arm. And she hated that she noticed, hated that she cared. When she finally drove back to the homestead in the darkness, Victoria felt confused and guilty. She barely knew Dalton Drake. They had spent perhaps 3 weeks in each other's company, most of it working. She had been married, even if she had never met her husband. Developing feelings for another man so quickly seemed wrong on every level, but feelings were not logical. And the truth was, she did care for him. More than was wise. The next morning, Dalton did not come by, or the day after that. By the third day, Victoria knew he was staying away deliberately, giving her space after what he had said at the dance. She told herself it was for the best. She needed to establish her independence, prove she could manage the homestead without constant help. But she missed him, missed his presence, his quiet competence, the way he made her feel safe. On the fourth day, Victoria was working in the garden when she heard riders approaching. Multiple horses moving fast. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun. 3 men she did not recognize pulled up near her cabin. Something about them made her uneasy. They looked rough, trail-worn, and the way they looked at her made her skin crawl. "Help you, gentlemen." She called, trying to keep her voice steady. The one in front, a man with a scarred face and mean eyes, grinned. "Heard there was a widow woman out here all alone. Thought we would stop by, be neighborly." "That is kind, but I am managing fine. Good day." Victoria turned toward the cabin, where the revolver Dalton had given her sat on the table inside. "Now, that is not very friendly," Scarface said, dismounting. The other two followed suit. "We rode all this way. Least you could do is offer some hospitality." Victoria's heart pounded. She was 20 feet from the cabin and they were between her and the door. "I said good day. And I say we are staying." Scarface took a step closer. "Maybe we look around, see what you got here. Maybe you got food to share, maybe other things." Victoria knew she needed help, needed it desperately. She opened her mouth to scream, hoping Dalton or someone would hear, when a voice cut across the yard. "The lady asked you to leave." Everyone turned. Dalton sat on his horse at the edge of the property, his rifle resting casually across his saddle. But there was nothing casual about the look on his face or the way his finger rested near the trigger. "This is not your business, friend," Scarface said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I am making it my business. You have 3 seconds to get on your horses and ride out. There are 3 of us, and I can shoot all 3 of you before you clear leather. Your choice." The standoff lasted several heartbeats. Victoria could see the calculation in Scarface's eyes, weighing his options. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Not worth it. Come on, boys." They mounted up and rode off, but not quickly, making it clear they were leaving by choice rather than fear. Dalton waited until they were out of sight before lowering the rifle and riding over to Victoria. "You all right?" he asked. Victoria realized she was shaking. "Yes, thank you. How did you know?" "I have been keeping an eye on the place. Saw them riding this direction and did not like the look of them." He dismounted. "You had your gun inside the cabin. You need to keep it on you when you are outside, all the time." His voice was sharp with worry. "Drifters come through sometimes, men who think a woman alone is easy prey. You cannot afford to be unarmed." "I understand." Victoria felt the fear draining away, replaced by embarrassment. "I am sorry, you were right. I am not ready to be alone out here." Dalton's expression softened. "You will learn. But until you do, I am going to be around more. And we need to get you a dog, something that will bark when strangers approach." "I thought you were staying away." "I was. I thought it was what you wanted after what I said at the dance." He paused. "But your safety matters more than your comfort with my feelings." Victoria looked at him, this man who had helped her from the beginning, who had been patient and kind and honest even when the truth was uncomfortable, who had just potentially saved her from something terrible. "I am sorry I pulled away. You startled me with what you said. I was not ready to hear it. And now I think I am a coward for hiding behind mourning customs to avoid acknowledging what I feel." Dalton went very still. "What do you feel?" Victoria took a breath, deciding to be as brave as he had been. "I care for you, Dalton. More than I should, more than is probably appropriate. You have become important to me. The thought of you staying away these past days has been harder than any of the work I have done on this homestead." His face broke into a slow smile, the real one she had only seen glimpses of before. "Good. Because I am falling in love with you, Victoria Reynolds, and I was starting to think I was the only one foolish enough to let it happen so fast." "It is too fast," Victoria said, but she was smiling too. "It has only been a few weeks. Sometimes that is all it takes." He reached out, taking her hand carefully, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His hand was warm, calloused from work, strong. "I know the situation is complicated. I know you are technically in mourning, that people will talk, but I also know that what I feel is real. And I think what you feel is real too." "It is," Victoria admitted. "I tried not to feel it. I tried to be practical, but you are impossible not to care about." Dalton laughed, the sound surprised and happy. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." They stood there, hands linked, smiling at each other like fools. Finally, Dalton said, "We should probably take this slow, court properly, Give you time to adjust, give the gossip time to die down. That is very sensible. I am occasionally sensible. Only occasionally. Do not push your luck. He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. Come on. Let us get you that gun to carry, and then I will start teaching you some more defensive skills. If you are going to stay out here, you need to be able to protect yourself when I am not around. Over the following weeks, Victoria's life fell into a new rhythm. She worked the homestead with increasing competence, her garden beginning to produce vegetables, the cabin becoming more livable with small improvements. Dalton came by most days, always with a purpose, teaching her to hunt, helping repair the well, bringing supplies from town, but the real purpose was simply to be together. They talked as they worked, sharing histories and dreams. Dalton told her about growing up in Texas, about the brother he was not close to, about his mother who had died when he was 16. Victoria shared stories of Philadelphia, of her sister's family, of the limited options available to unmarried women in the city. They discovered shared values, similar senses of humor, a compatibility that went beyond the physical attraction building between them, because there was attraction, undeniable and growing stronger. Victoria found herself noticing everything about Dalton, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the strength in his hands, the sound of his laugh. She caught him watching her too, his gaze warm and admiring in a way that made her feel beautiful despite her sunburned face and work-roughened hands. They were careful not to let things progress too quickly. Dalton never pressed for more than she was ready to give. But there were moments, small intimacies that felt significant, his hand at her back helping her over rough ground. The way he would brush a strand of hair from her face when she was focused on a task. The times their fingers would touch passing tools and neither would pull away immediately. Sarah Mitchell proved to be a good friend, visiting regularly and helping Victoria navigate the social complexities of the community. "Everyone knows you and Dalton are courting," she said one afternoon as they worked on preserving vegetables. "The mourning period is a formality at this point. No one expects you to mourn a proxy husband for a year. What do people think about it?" Victoria asked. "Mostly that you are lucky to have caught Dalton's attention. Rebecca Hall is green with envy, but that is her problem." Sarah grinned. "Honestly, I have never seen him like this with anyone." "He is smitten." Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest. "I am rather smitten myself. That is obvious. The way you two look at each other is almost indecent." "Sarah, it is a compliment. Trust me, half the women in the county would kill to have a man look at them the way Dalton looks at you." As summer progressed into early fall, Victoria truly began to feel like the homestead was hers. She had calluses on her hands from work, muscles she had not known existed, and a deep tan that would have horrified her mother. But she had also planted and harvested her first crops, successfully managed a small herd of cattle, and made the cabin into a real home. She had proved she could survive out here, more than survive. She was building a life. One evening in late September, Dalton arrived with a bouquet of wildflowers. "These were growing on the ridge between our properties. Made me think of you." Victoria took them, touched by the gesture. "They are beautiful, thank you." "I have been thinking," Dalton said, suddenly seeming nervous in a way she had never seen him before. "You have been here almost 4 months now. You have made this place work. You have proved everyone who doubted you wrong, myself included." "Thank you." "And we have been courting more or less for most of that time." "Yes." Victoria's heart began to beat faster. Dalton took her free hand, his expression serious. "Victoria, I know this is not the most romantic proposal. I know you have already been through one marriage, even if it was never really real. But I love you. I want to spend my life with you. I want to combine our properties, build something together, have a family. Will you marry me? Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. This was so different from accepting Thomas's proposal through letters, agreeing to a marriage of convenience with a stranger. This was choosing a man she knew, a man she loved, a future she actively wanted. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Dalton pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, wrapping her arms around his neck. When he kissed her, it was everything a first kiss should be, sweet and tender and full of promise. Victoria felt like her heart might burst from happiness. "I love you," she said when they finally pulled apart. "I know I have not said it clearly before, but I do. I love you. I love you too." Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "You are the bravest, most determined woman I have ever met. I am so glad you came here. Even though I refused to sell you the land, especially because of that. Anyone else would have given up. You fought for what you wanted. That is admirable." They stood there in the doorway of the cabin, holding each other as the sun set, and Victoria thought about how much had changed in 4 months. She had come here expecting one life and found something completely different. Better. She had found love, real love, the kind built on respect and partnership and genuine affection. She had found a home, not just a place to live, but a true home. She had found herself, discovered strength she had not known she possessed. They were married in early October, in the same church hall where they had danced together months before. Victoria wore a simple dress of deep blue, not white, acknowledging that this was a second marriage even if the first had been unconsummated and barely real. The whole community turned out, filling the hall with well wishes and celebration. Sarah stood up with Victoria, and Dalton's ranch hand Tom stood with him. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Dalton kissed her thoroughly, earning whistles and laughter from the assembled guests. The reception was a joyous affair, with food and dancing and toasts to the new couple. Even Rebecca Hall came, gracious in defeat, wishing them well with what seemed like genuine sincerity. As Victoria danced with her new husband, she felt such overwhelming happiness that she could barely contain it. "What are you thinking?" Dalton asked, smiling down at her. "That I am the luckiest woman alive. I am pretty sure I am the lucky one. We can both be lucky. That works." He spun her in a circle, making her laugh. "Are you ready to go home?" "Which home?" Victoria asked. They had decided to live at Dalton's ranch, which was larger and in better condition, but keep her property for running additional cattle. "Ours," Dalton said simply. "It is all ours now." That night, in the home that was now hers in truth, Victoria experienced the wedding night she had thought she would have months ago with Thomas. But this was nothing like what she had imagined that would be. This was with a man she loved, a man who loved her, and it was beautiful and right in a way she had not known to hope for. Afterward, lying in Dalton's arms in the darkness, Victoria said, "I need to tell you something. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest." She took a breath. "When I agreed to marry Thomas, I was not looking for love. I was looking for escape, for purpose, for a life of my own. I thought love was a bonus if it happened, but not necessary. And now I know I was wrong. The purpose and the independence are wonderful, and I am grateful for them. But the love is what makes it matter. You are what makes it matter." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you so much, Dalton, more than I thought I could love anyone." Dalton kissed her forehead gently. "I love you too. From the moment you refused to sell me that land, determined to make it work despite having no idea what you were doing, I think I started falling. You have this fire in you, this refusal to give up. It is remarkable. You brought out the best in me. No, darling. I just gave you the space and tools to show what was already there." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, content and complete. Life as a married couple fell into a comfortable pattern. They divided their time between the two properties, running cattle across both, building up the herds. Victoria continued to improve her original homestead, unable to abandon the place that had represented her first taste of freedom. Dalton understood and supported her efforts, working alongside her to make both properties successful. The first winter was challenging but manageable together. They laid in supplies, prepared the animals, and weathered the cold months in front of a warm fire. Victoria learned to cook on the ranch stove, improving with practice until she could produce meals Dalton praised enthusiastically. She took up knitting during the long evenings, making socks and mittens and scarves for them both. Spring arrived with new possibilities. They planted larger gardens, increased their cattle operation, and hired another hand to help with the expanded work. Victoria was deeply involved in all decisions, her opinion valued equally with Dalton's. The partnership she had originally sought with Thomas became reality with Dalton, but enriched by love and genuine companionship. In late summer, Victoria realized she had missed her monthly courses. Twice. She sat with the knowledge for a few days, wanting to be sure before saying anything. When she was certain, she waited until evening, until they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, to tell Dalton. "I have news," she said, taking his hand. "Good news, I hope. Very good. I am going to have a baby." Dalton turned to her, his expression transforming from surprise to joy so pure it took her breath away. "Truly, truly. Probably due in early spring." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." Victoria laughed at his wonder. "You seem surprised. It is a fairly predictable result of marriage. I know, but the reality of it is different." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you happy, so happy?" "Are you happier than I have words for?" He kissed her thoroughly. "We need to tell people. We need to prepare. Do we need a cradle? Of course we need a cradle. I can build one. And baby clothes. Do you know how to make baby clothes?" Victoria laughed at his sudden nervousness. "We have time. Months, Dalton. We will figure it out." "Right, of course. I just want everything to be perfect for you and the baby." "It will be. We will make sure of it together." The months of pregnancy passed with Victoria continuing to work alongside Dalton for as long as she safely could. The community rallied around them, with Sarah and the other women offering advice, hand-me-down baby items, and assistance. Dalton was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worried about Victoria overdoing things. She found it endearing even when it was frustrating. Winter came again, and Victoria grew large with child. Dalton finished the cradle he had been working on, carved from oak and sanded smooth, with small stars and moons carved into the headboard. He placed it next to their bed, ready for the baby that would arrive with spring. In late March, Victoria went into labor. Dalton rode for the midwife while Sarah stayed with Victoria, talking her through the contractions. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Dalton paced outside the bedroom, refusing to leave the house, jumping at every sound. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy boy with a loud cry and his father's blue eyes, the midwife brought him out to Dalton first. "You have a son," she said, placing the bundle in his arms. "Mother and baby are both doing well." Dalton stared down at the tiny face, his expression full of wonder. "He is perfect. He is indeed. Let me clean him up a bit more, then you can see your wife." When Dalton was finally allowed into the bedroom, he found Victoria exhausted but radiant, propped up against pillows. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, still holding their son. "You did so well. He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Let me see him properly." Victoria held out her arms and Dalton carefully transferred the baby to her. She looked down at the small face, at the tiny fingers curling against her breast, and felt her heart expand beyond what she thought possible. "Hello, little one, we have been waiting for you. What should we name him?" Dalton asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Victoria looked at the baby, then at Dalton, then said, "David, David Thomas Drake, for your father and for the man whose land gave me a start here." Dalton's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect, thank you." Little David proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who kept them busy, but filled their lives with joy. Dalton was a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings even though he could not nurse, walking the floor with David when he cried, singing to him in a low voice that always seemed to calm him. Victoria recovered slowly, but well. With Sarah's help and the support of the other women in the community, she navigated the challenges of new motherhood. The homestead work continued with hired help taking on more of the daily tasks, allowing Victoria to focus on the baby while still maintaining involvement in decisions. As spring turned to summer and David grew from newborn to infant, Victoria often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the terrified woman who had arrived expecting to meet a husband she had never seen, only to find him dead. She thought about the desperate determination that had made her claim the land anyway, refuse to sell, insist she could make it work. She thought about the blue-eyed cowboy who had helped her, challenged her, and ultimately loved her. One evening, as they sat on the porch with David asleep in Victoria's arms, she said, "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" "Different how?" Dalton asked. "If Thomas had not died, if I had arrived to meet him as planned." Dalton was quiet for a moment. "I try not to think about it because it makes me feel guilty. A man died, and my happiness came from his death in a roundabout way. I know what you mean, but I cannot help wondering sometimes, would I have been happy with him? Would we have built a good partnership? Or would I have always felt like something was missing? You cannot know, and there is no use torturing yourself over might have beens." "I suppose not." Victoria leaned against his shoulder. "I am happy with what is. That is what matters. We are all happy with what is." Dalton put his arm around her carefully, mindful of the sleeping baby. "You, me, and this little guy. Should we think about names for the next one?" Dalton looked at her in surprise. "Already planning the next one," Victoria smiled. "I come from a large family. I always thought I would have several children if I married, and now that we have David, I cannot imagine him being an only child." "Fair enough. Though maybe we wait until this one is sleeping through the night before we worry about adding another. That is probably wise." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over land that was theirs, watching over a child they had created together, surrounded by a love that had grown from neighborly assistance into something neither had expected but both treasured. The years passed with the rhythm of farm life. David grew from infant to toddler to boy, learning to walk and talk and help with small chores. When he was 2, Victoria became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, perhaps because her body had done this before. She gave birth to a daughter in the winter, a small, delicate girl they named Emma Rose. Dalton was absolutely smitten with his daughter, carrying her everywhere, talking to her constantly. David, now a big brother, was initially uncertain but quickly became protective of his baby sister. Victoria watched her family grow and felt a contentment she had not known was possible. The ranch prospered under their combined management. They had expanded to over 400 head of cattle, built a proper bunkhouse for hired hands, and improved both the original homestead and Dalton's ranch house. Victoria had become known in the community as a shrewd businesswoman, her opinion sought on matters of livestock and land management. She had proved herself not just as a survivor, but as a success. When Emma was 3 and David 5, Victoria found herself pregnant again. This baby, another boy they named Henry James, arrived easily, almost startling them with how quick and straightforward the birth was compared to his siblings. Henry was a calm baby, content to watch the world with serious eyes, so different from David's constant energy and Emma's demanding personality. Their family felt complete with 3 children. Victoria and Dalton worked together seamlessly, balancing ranch duties with parenting, maintaining their partnership in all things. The love between them had only deepened over the years, maturing from that first heady attraction into something steady and enduring. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dalton took Victoria into town for a rare dinner alone, leaving the children with Sarah and her family. Over the meal, he said, "Do you remember when you first arrived? You were so determined, so stubborn, absolutely certain you could make the homestead work despite having no idea what you were doing." Victoria laughed. "I was terrified. I just hit it well. You were magnificent. I could not decide if you were incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Perhaps both. Definitely both." Dalton reached across the table, taking her hand. "But that stubbornness, that refusal to give up, it is one of the things I love most about you. You see what you want and you make it happen." "I wanted you," Victoria said softly. "From very early on, even when I tried to deny it, you were what I wanted. And you got me for life. No regrets, not a single one." Dalton raised his glass. "To the woman who came to claim her dead husband's land and ended up claiming my heart instead." Victoria clinked her glass against his. "To the cowboy who helped me stay and made me fall hard." They drank to that, to the unexpected journey that had brought them together, to the life they had built, to the future still ahead. When they returned home late that night, the children were asleep. Victoria and Dalton stood in the doorway of the room the kids shared, watching them sleep. David sprawled across his bed, Emma curled up with her favorite doll, Henry making soft, snuffling sounds in his crib. "We made all this," Victoria whispered. "From nothing, we built everything." "You built it first," Dalton corrected. "You took a falling-down cabin and untilled land and made it something. I just helped along the way. You were more than help. You were everything." Dalton turned her to face him in the hallway, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Do you remember when I first told you I was falling in love with you? That day in your yard after those drifters came by? I remember. I thought it was too soon, too fast. And now I know that sometimes love happens quickly because it is right. It was not too soon. It was exactly when it was supposed to happen." Victoria reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "I love you, Dalton Drake. Today, tomorrow, forever." "Forever," Dalton agreed, kissing her. "I like the sound of that." As they went to their own bedroom, Victoria thought about the girl she had been 10 years ago, stepping off that wagon in Eureka Springs with no idea what her future held. That girl had been brave out of desperation, determined out of necessity. She had claimed land she had never seen because it was her only option for independence. But the woman she had become had claimed so much more. She had claimed a life built on her own terms, a partnership with a man who valued and respected her, children who were growing up seeing their mother as strong and capable. She had claimed love, real love, the kind that sustained and nurtured and made everything else worthwhile. The land had been the beginning, but Dalton had been the heart of it all. He had helped her stay when everyone else expected her to fail. He had taught her what she needed to know, supported her independence even as he offered his assistance. He had loved her for exactly who she was, never trying to change her or make her smaller. And in loving him back, Victoria had found the home she had been seeking all along. Not just in the land or the house, but in the partnership they had built, in the family they had created, in the life they shared. The next morning began like any other. Dalton rose early to start on the day's work. Victoria got the children up, fed them breakfast, started them on their morning chores. David was old enough now to help feed chickens and collect eggs. Emma could dress herself mostly, though she often needed help with buttons. Henry toddled around, getting into everything, curious and fearless. After breakfast, Victoria walked out to meet Dalton in the barn, Henry on her hip. She found her husband mending tack, his hands moving with the easy competence she had admired from the beginning. "You need help with anything today?" she asked. "Always." He looked up and smiled at her, that smile she had fallen in love with, the one that reached his eyes and made her heart flutter even after 10 years. "But I am pretty sure you have your hands full with this one." Henry reached for his father and Dalton took him, swinging him up to sit on his shoulders. The boy laughed with delight, gripping Dalton's hair to steady himself. "He wants to be just like you," Victoria observed. "Poor kid. He could do better." "I disagree. I think having you as a father is the best thing that could happen to any child." Dalton looked at her with such love that it took her breath away, even now. "You are good for my ego, Mrs. Drake. Someone has to be." They worked together through the morning, Victoria helping where she could with Henry nearby, directing the older children in their tasks, managing the household while also staying involved in ranch decisions. It was a busy life, often exhausting, but it was theirs. That afternoon, Sarah brought her children over to play with David and Emma. The two women sat on the porch, shelling peas and watching the kids run around the yard. "You look happy," Sarah observed. "I am happy, very happy. You deserve it. After everything you went through getting here, making the homestead work, proving everyone wrong, you earned this happiness." Victoria thought about that. "Maybe, but I think I also just got lucky. Lucky that Dalton was my neighbor. Lucky that he was the kind of man who would help. Lucky that we fell in love. It was not all luck. You did the work, you made good choices. You were brave when you needed to be." Sarah paused. "Remember when you first arrived? Everyone was taking bets on how long you would last. Most people gave you 2 weeks before you sold out and went back east. Really, really. Dalton was the only one who thought you might make it. Even when he was offering to buy your land, he told me privately that you had grit. He said if you could get past the learning curve, you might actually succeed." Victoria smiled. "He never told me that. He would not. He is not one for bragging." Sarah tied off the bag of shelled peas. "But I have known Dalton since he first came to the area. I have never seen him like he is with you. You are good together." "We are." Victoria looked out at the land stretching before her, the property that had started as a desperate gamble and become a true home. "I came here looking for independence and found partnership instead. I thought I had to choose between being my own person and being connected to someone. Dalton taught me I could be both. That is what the right partner does." They talked for a while longer before Sarah gathered her children and headed home. Victoria started on dinner, peeling potatoes and preparing meat while the children played inside. When Dalton came in, dusty and tired from the day's work, she poured him coffee and listened as he talked about what still needed doing before winter. After dinner, after the children were bathed and read to and tucked into bed, Victoria and Dalton sat together in their bedroom. It was a rare, quiet moment and Victoria treasured it. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, brushing her hair like he often did in the evenings. "The past. The future. How grateful I am for everything we have." "That is some heavy thinking. Good heavy, though." She turned to face him. "Dalton, do you think Thomas would be happy with how things turned out? Would he be glad I stayed, that I made his land work, even though it ended up being with you instead of him?" Dalton set down the brush, considering the question seriously. "I think Thomas was a good man who wanted to build something here. He wanted a partner, someone to work alongside him and create a life with. That is what you did. The fact that you did it with me instead does not change that you fulfilled what he was hoping for. I think he would be happy you did not give up, that his land became part of something successful. I hope so. I feel guilty sometimes that I am so happy that I love you so much that I barely think about him anymore. You did not know him, Victoria. You do not owe him decades of grief. What you gave him was respect by staying, by making his claim matter. That is enough." Victoria leaned against her husband's shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "I have been wise all along. You just did not notice because you were too busy being stubborn." She elbowed him gently. "I was determined, not stubborn. There is a difference, absolutely." Dalton laughed, pulling her closer. "Determined, then. My determined, brave, beautiful wife who came here with nothing and built everything." "We built everything," Victoria corrected. Together, Dalton agreed. As they lay down to sleep, wrapped around each other in the bed they had shared for 10 years, Victoria felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she was meant to be, not just the physical place, though she loved the land with a fierce pride. But here, in this life, with this man, raising these children, building this future. She had come to Arkansas on a desperate gamble, willing to marry a stranger for a chance at independence. She had stayed through grief and determination, refusing to let circumstances defeat her. And she had found love, real and lasting, with a man who had helped her without trying to control her, who had fallen for her strength rather than trying to diminish it. The next morning was Sunday, and they all loaded into the wagon to head into town for church. The kids were clean and dressed in their best clothes, Emma wearing a new dress Victoria had made, Henry squirming in Dalton's arms. They drove past the original homestead on the way, and Victoria looked at it with affection. They used it now primarily for equipment storage, and as a lined shack for hands working that section of the combined ranch. But she kept it maintained, unable to let go of the place that had been her beginning. At church, they sat with the community they had become part of, the people who had watched Victoria arrive as an uncertain widow and seen her become a respected rancher and mother. After the service, they socialized outside, the men talking cattle and weather while the women shared recipes and gossip. Victoria held Henry on her hip while chatting with a group that included Sarah and several other friends. "I heard the railroad might come through next year," one woman said. "Can you imagine? We would be able to ship cattle all the way to Chicago without trail drives." "That would change everything," Victoria agreed. She and Dalton had discussed the possibility extensively. The railroad would mean better prices for their beef, easier access to supplies, more opportunities all around. "Some people say it will ruin the area, bring in too many outsiders," another woman said. "Change is not always bad," Victoria countered. "I was an outsider once. The community gave me a chance, and I think we have all benefited from that." There were nods of agreement. Victoria had proved herself over the years, and the other women respected her now in a way they had not when she first arrived. Dalton appeared at her elbow, David and Emma trailing behind him. "Ready to head home?" "I think so." Victoria shifted Henry to her other hip. "Kids, say goodbye." They made their farewells and climbed back into the wagon. On the ride home, David peppered his father with questions about horses and cattle, while Emma told Victoria an elaborate story about her doll's adventures. Henry fell asleep against Victoria's shoulder, and she held him close, breathing in his baby smell, knowing these moments were fleeting. That evening, after another busy day, after dinner and cleanup and the nighttime routines with the children, Victoria stepped out onto the porch to enjoy the cool air. Dalton joined her a moment later, handing her a shawl. "Thought you might be cold." "Thank you." She wrapped it around her shoulders. "The stars are beautiful tonight, they are." But Dalton was not looking at the sky, he was looking at her. "What?" Victoria asked, self-conscious under his gaze. "Just thinking about how lucky I am, how this could have all gone so differently." "You said I should not dwell on might-have-beens." "I know. But sometimes I cannot help it. If you had given up and left, if you had been less stubborn about staying, if you had not been willing to let me help you, if you had not been brave enough to admit you had feelings for me. Any of those things could have happened, and I would have missed out on the best decade of my life." Victoria moved closer to him. "I was thinking the same thing earlier. How many small choices led to this? Answering Thomas's letter in the first place, deciding to claim the land even after he died, refusing your offer to buy it, accepting your help, going to that first dance, admitting I cared for you. Every choice mattered. And you made all the right ones. We made them together once you came along." Dalton put his arm around her, and they stood together looking out at the land they had built into something remarkable. 2 properties merged into one successful ranch, 3 children growing up healthy and happy. A partnership that was both romantic and practical, built on love and respect in equal measure. "You think the children will want to run the ranch when they grow up?" Victoria wondered. "Probably. David already acts like he owns the place. Emma will likely boss everyone around no matter what she does. Henry is too young to tell, but my guess is he will be drawn to it. They love it here. I want them to have choices, though. If they want something different, something beyond ranching, I want them to be able to pursue that." "We will make sure they can," Dalton promised. "Just like you pursued what you needed when the time came." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "I love our life, so do I." They stayed there for a while longer, wrapped in each other and in the satisfaction of a life well lived. When they finally went inside, Victoria checked on each child one last time, adjusting blankets and brushing hair from faces. In their bedroom, she and Dalton prepared for sleep with the comfortable efficiency of long practice. As Victoria drifted off, she thought about the young woman who had arrived in Eureka Springs so long ago, scared and alone and determined to make an impossible situation work. That woman had been brave, but she had not known what real courage looked like. Real courage was not just surviving, it was building. It was opening your heart when you had every reason to guard it. It was accepting help while maintaining your independence. It was creating something from nothing and nurturing it into abundance. Victoria had done all that. She had come to claim her dead husband's land, and in doing so had claimed a life beyond anything she had imagined possible. The neighboring cowboy who had helped her stay had indeed fallen hard, but so had she. Together, they had built something neither could have achieved alone. Years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable changes. The railroad did come through, transforming the region. David grew into a young man who loved ranching as much as his father, already talking about expanding the operation. Emma developed a talent for breeding horses, showing an instinct for bloodlines that impressed even experienced horsemen. Henry surprised everyone by showing an interest in books and learning, and Victoria and Dalton began discussing sending him to school in Little Rock when he was older. Through it all, Victoria and Dalton remained partners in every sense. They made decisions together, supported each other through difficulties, celebrated successes as a team. The passion between them never fully dimmed, even as their hair began to gray and lines appeared around their eyes. They knew each other completely, the way only people who have built a life together can. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Victoria stood on the same porch where Dalton had proposed decades earlier, looking out at everything they had created. The ranch was prosperous, their children were thriving, their love remained strong. She heard Dalton come up behind her, felt his arms encircle her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, the same question he had asked hundreds of times over the years. "Everything. Nothing. How happy I am." She turned in his arms to face him. 20 years, Dalton. Can you believe it? Best 20 years of my life. Mine, too." She kissed him softly. "I came here expecting nothing and found everything. We found it together." "Yes," Victoria agreed, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Together." And there, surrounded by the land that had started as a desperate claim and became a true home, wrapped in the arms of the man who had helped her stay and fallen hard in the process, Victoria Reynolds Drake knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The journey had been unexpected, often difficult, and absolutely worth every moment. She had built a life on her own terms, found love in the most unlikely circumstances, and created a legacy that would continue through her children and beyond. It was more than she had dreamed of when she stepped off that wagon so long ago. It was everything.